process back here.
This isn't some decaying corpse on the ground. This is a living thing that's going to be coming after you in the world.
The fungus is always the focal point. So you can see from a distance, oh, this guy's infected. I can tell straight away.
In fungus, they have these beautiful saturated colors, and we really like that contrast of this something so horrific that it's going to like stop at nothing. It's relentless force of death, and yet elements of it are beautiful. It's not just about gore. It's not just about everything about it being scary, because to us it's actually scarier when things on it are somewhat benign or somewhat beautiful.
It was evident that we were onto something that was quite a bit different, and something that we hadn't really seen before, which was eerily human but very disturbing.
And it seemed so creepy and so unique that right away we gravitated towards it, and it's like, this is our base infected. So once we had this idea of the face-splitting kind of look that eventually became what we called the clicker stage.
We went to great lengths to create a full biological cycle for these things.
So in the early stages, you don't actually see too many signs of the fungus surfacing out of the skin. It's kind of underneath it, like people have lumps starting to show. The eyes will be kind of cloudy or lopsided because the fungus kind of originates inside the head.
That moves into the next phase, which is the clicking phase.
And if they mess with the eyes, we end up saying, well, how do they get around? Oh, echolocation.
And they use a form of echolocation to track down their enemies.
Just like bats, or even some blind people can see by making a clicking sound, a sound that on its own wouldn't be very scary. And then to associate it with something that people in this world are very fearful of, so that as you're exploring an environment, all of a sudden you hear this click, and you're seeing everybody just get frightened, just everybody duck, everybody hushes.
Great.
The bloater is the most severe of the stages. So large pieces of the body has been replaced by these kind of fungal plates.
The fungus completely takes over the body and blooms.
They're kind of covered in things that have been growing on them. Things like moss and like little life on life kind of.
What the fuck is that?
Goddamn bloater!
When the infected feels like it's going to die, it finds like a dark corner and it becomes part of the environment.
The human elements aren't there anymore.
And then the body is gone.
They lay down and sprout and then spew spores.
And if people can breathe those spores, they become infected as well. It all had to kind of make sense of how each stage flowed from one to the other. And that's hopefully how we've created a world that you can kind of look through it and understand the science behind it and say, I could buy this, I could get into this.
Mandatory evacuation. Evacuate to where?
What do you think? Quarantine zone. See, some places got a heads up before the infection showed up. Most didn't.
Over the course of Joel and Ellie's journey through this game across America,
you find all these different societies, all these different enclaves, and you get to see how do they deal with the infected.
without the manifestation of this infection, you can't have these people making those interesting choices.
The world we decided was actually its own character, really grounded with a lot of texture. What happens, after 20 years of the fall of man, when no one's taking care of anything.
This book called The World Without Us describes in detail how much fighting on a day-to-day basis we have to do to keep nature back. And once you stop doing that, how quickly nature can reclaim that. As they talk about New York and how every day they pump water out of the subway system. That system breaks down. Within 2 days, the whole city is flooded. And once water gets introduced, then structures collapse pretty quickly. Trees will sprout, and wind will carry those seeds over, and gutters get clogged, and then when it rains, water fills up, and then pretty soon you have vegetation growing over there, and once you have vegetation, concrete breaks pretty easily for when there's a tree and roots breaking through that. Even some of the stuff we did on Uncharted, exploration of how temples were ruined, what if you took those ideas and put them in Pittsburgh or Boston?
And obviously right when that happened, you can imagine Years later, and with rainwater filling up those sinkholes and then those becoming like little marshes with lily pads in them.
We had this wonderful piece of concept art we developed really early on, and there are all of these wild animals that have escaped from a zoo and over the past 20 years have bred, and now they have herds roaming these cities. And that's something that tells you that life goes on and this world is worth saving.
There's something really pretty about nature reclaiming its domain once we are gone.
So fucking cool.
We have another level of OCD of the logic goes into some of these environments. Water damage seeps into them, that creates some little moss growing on the floor, or a tree radiates energy from its base, and that over time starts to melt the snow around it. And that's the reason why you'd see those like rings of leaves showing through in the snow. That gives it that extra, believability. This is pitch art. I'll try to start with an idea that conveys sort of the feel of the environment. Something like this, very brushstrokey, very painterly. You can see not a lot of detail, just energy and conveying a mood. This is sort of just a conversation starter, and then this would be more of an actual space. So you start talking about, is this too tight of a space right here? Would the player even fit through there? Do we even want to include water? Those are conversations you start having a little bit later. And then it usually needs several more passes back and forth in order to be tightened up to be the experience that you would see in the final product. So, dude, I was actually trying to figure out right here, there should probably be some dead foliage.
It might be cool to see some of the dead stuff around the edges of the green, or like even spilling out into the street.
Maybe what we do is, in some of these areas, we use it as like a transition from the actual concrete to the side of the building, so like they're almost sitting on top of a bed of dead foliage, like that really rich kind of like orangey brown color.
Sienna or something would be nice. Something real cheddary.
That's how you know you're done. The end product often ends up being stronger because that bouncing back off somebody else gives you a result that maybe you wouldn't have even thought of in the first place.
All right, here's the bridge. That's our way out of here.
As far as concept art goes, definitely the ultimate goal is just helping everybody as much as possible.
Me and the background artist will work together. I'll often just go to them because they've got like a really, really good like visual imagination. At some point, you came in almost like flat on. So that's kind of good because the bus station is right in your peripheral view, and you're probably going to enter the bus station. You're probably not going to get lost. But it doesn't at all utilize this cool architecture here, like the bus station sign. Like that's a really distinctive silhouette, and it's a really interesting sort of architectural detail. So we changed the entrance.
Look at that. Another city, another abandoned quarantine zone.
I think it's a better composition anyway. It's not so like symmetrical. And I think that was done so that this sign read better. If you didn't see the word bus on it, you might not know it's a bus station. So I think that helps.
Everything we're doing in the environments is relating back to what you should be feeling in the story or what's happening to these characters.
Was that everything you hoped for?
Jury's still out. But man, can't deny that view.
Come on, this way.
When we first came up with Ellie and Joel, we had this idea in our heads of who they would be, but we didn't necessarily know the voice.
It took us a while to find our Joel, but for Ellie, I think Ashley was the second or third candidate to walk in, and right away we knew.
Yeah, you know
Why
what?
are you so scared all of a sudden?
Because I'm a coward, okay? So just get your shit and let's get out of here.
Damn it. I'm not like her, you know.
What?
You think I'm gonna end up like your daughter?
The way she delivered the lines, the way she just embodied that character, is like, that's Ellie, there's no question about it.
I saw the character artwork and I related to her a lot. I mean, she's kind of a tomboy and she's kind of tough, and I mean, obviously I'm not 14, and I think that's the main difference between the two of us. I read the scenes and I was like, I need to play this part.
You wanna be my hero? Forget the whole bit about saving my life. Buy me a stack of these bad boys instead.
Where'd you get that?
Back at Bill's. I mean, all this stuff was just lying around.
And then once we had her, we said, okay, well, we're going to do another round, and we're going to have Ashley this time in the casting sessions. The chemistry of these two characters was imperative to get right.
Troy was a really interesting casting for Joel, because when you see Troy, he doesn't look like Joel at all.
You know, he's so handsome, and he had, like, you know, the frosty hair, and totally looked like Final Fantasy. And so
I'm like, yeah, I don't know. He's like this tall, pretty. It didn't seem right.
I walked into the room fully aware that I was the youngest person that they were seeing for this role. There was a line that was in the audition side that says that Joel has few moral lines left to cross. And so that became the anchor point to the character.
But then as soon as he spoke, and he had the grit in his voice.
Warm, yet kind of dangerous.
And his movement is just like, you bought into it.
Why are you so scared all of a sudden?
Because I'm a big coward, okay? Now pack up your shit and let's go.
God damn it. I'm not her, you know.
What?
You think I'm gonna end up like your daughter?
Lily, you are treading on some very thin ice right now.
It was Ellie and Joel.
after he read, it was just like, that was it.
I've done some video games in the past, but to be handed the mantle of a franchise like this was a pretty big honor.
Is she alive?
She's alive. She's David's newest pet. Ah!
Where?
In the town. She's in the town.
You mark it on the map. It better be the same exact spot your buddy points to.
Neil pulled me aside one day, and he said, I have some ideas. And as you're well aware, Neil is a little twisted. He came up with this character, and, you know, I just jumped at it. It was such a departure from everything I've done here for Naughty Dog, to say the least.
Name's David. This here's my friend James. We're from a larger group. Women, children.